that should be fine. It was the two things. I said, oh, next to the. Well, I can't wait to hear how the retreat went.
And I was going to say that the presentation by the students, I'm actually in their class, so we work to time those presentations to be within the time frame of like the presentation is still 25 minutes, then it's a little bit of extra time, then a little bit of extra time for the questions. So that should be fine.
Okay, but that's to go because now I got simultaneous not very loud. But I'm here and you're good, and so there.
Let me hear it here as well.
Yeah. Oh, love you. That's my last little thing.
Here we go.
All right. I'm going away, but I'm here. Here. Back to these guys. Do I hear you? Oops.
Did I stay muted?
Hi, Rob. Can I
Hello.
hear somebody?
Hi, Deb.
Oh, now I can see everybody.
Jay, can you talk, or Christina?
Can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know why. Does somebody have a double Zoom on? Oh. I
Maybe
don't know.
maybe it was because we were on the phone, Deb.
Totally. Okay, you're gone now. Okay, we're gonna, I will end up staying here as a little square, but I'm gonna go. You guys look great. As you know, you'll be live at 5. And we'll see you again at about 10 of 7. And I'm sorry, I can't change it to WillieNet. I need it, it's a Chromebook. I gotta, so it should say WillieNet instead of Deb Dane. Do you see that, Christina?
It says Deb Dane, yeah.
Yeah, I can't, it won't let me change it on this computer. We'll work on that.
Jake, I'm so bummed the coyotes were just making a ton of noise and I was hoping you would catch it.
I always miss them.
Yeah, it's wild.
My Shih Tzu here.
It's December 14th, 2020, and it is 5:00 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom for Governor Baker's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, MGLC 30A, Section 20. The public will not be allowed to physically access this school committee meeting. At Mount Greylock Regional School District, our mission is to create a community of learners working together in a safe and challenging learning environment that encourages restorative-based processes, respect, inclusive diversity, courtesy, integrity, and responsibility through the high expectations and cooperation resulting in lifelong learning and personal growth. I'd like to welcome and thank you for taking time to participate in our public forum. 28 individuals have signed up for comment, and we do have a tight 1-hour time limit on this meeting. That being said, each speaker will be given 2 minutes. I will raise a virtual hand at the 1:30 mark, my actual hand at the 1:45 mark, and at 5 seconds remaining, I'll give a verbal reminder. The list of speakers has been arranged to allow for speakers representing 2 general viewpoints, those generally in favor of an artificial surface field and those generally opposed to an artificial surface field, speaking in turn. Anyone who's submitted comment or has written comment that they're going to read, if you would be willing to, at the end of this meeting, email that to the committee, that would be great. That way Stephen Miller can add it to our minutes. Okay, so let's get started. I have my timer set up. Let me just get that going. And first up is Dave Armet.
Thank you. My name, as you just mentioned, is Dave Armet. I'm a physical therapist with almost 30 years of experience evaluating and treating a variety of injuries and physical dysfunctions. As the debate about this field project has gone on, there have been concerns raised about increased risk of injury associated with turf surfaces. I am here today to completely dispel those concerns. Studies often cited come from Division I college football or European professional soccer, but none of them are conclusive enough to stop athletes from playing on these fields. Professional teams would not risk their multi-million-dollar investments in players if they knew the field surface was contributing to injury. There is just too much at stake financially. To date, there are no clear and conclusive studies indicating increased risk of injury from playing on a turf surface. But let's stay focused on our local field situation. What is very clear and conclusive is the surface we have been subjecting our children to at Mount Greylock is an absolute atrocity. It has led to injury. I've been a spectator and seen them happen. I've been the therapist to treat many of these injuries. Injuries caused by running on a rutted, uneven surface. Injuries caused by daily practice on a grass that feels more like concrete. Injuries caused by foot placement in what can only be referred to as field potholes. Given what the students have been playing on, my professional opinion would be that a turf surface would actually reduce the risk of injury for the users of the field. We have seen what happens to grass fields. Even a new grass field in this climate will deteriorate quickly, and we will be right back in the same situation of having a surface that contributes to injury. I would also like to add a brief mention about concussions. In the inevitable event that an athlete hitting their head as they fall to the ground during a game or practice, I would much rather have that surface be turf with more shock absorption and cushion than the rock hard surface that currently exists. So the choice from a safety standpoint is very simple. Building a turf field is the best choice for student safety and reducing the risk of injury.
Thank you, Dave. Next up is Ann O'Connor.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for hosting this committee or this meeting. The main point I wish to make with my comments today is to urge the committee to take a step back and widen the scope of what is under consideration. Rather than zeroing in on what kind of new field to build, the committee should take advantage of its own relative newness in order to make a fresh start. I urge members to examine the larger question of what is needed for a successful athletics and wellness program and what makes sense for the school as a whole, now and into the future. Why pick an expensive, short-lived product whose main purpose is early spring access to a playing field, when cross-country skiing and track are two of the most popular programs at the school? Properly maintained organic grass fields for the entire campus would provide close to the same amount of playing hours with far fewer financial, environmental, and health impacts. With these spoken comments, I will be submitting written comments, a letter I wrote to the Berkshire Eagle in September 2019, in which I viewed the project through the lens of climate change. Today, we should also consider how the landscape will change after COVID-19. The next 10 to 20 years will bring substantial challenges that will require tremendous resilience and creativity from us all. Rather than locking us into an expensive, outdated technological solution for one smaller problem within the overall picture, the district should instead focus on developing, diversifying, and preserving its many assets. Mount Greylock has a huge, beautiful campus. I urge the committee to pause the artificial turf project and more broadly examine its options and possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Next up, we have, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Suk.
You pronounced that fine, by the way. It's Suk Namkoong. I'm a local orthopedic surgeon, also commenting on the injury risks associated with the turf field. I've been in practice here since 2004. I'm the head team physician at Williams College. I was a team consultant with UMass Amherst, a Division I college. Through my training, I worked with the New York Mets, a professional sports franchise. There are studies that would suggest turf fields may lead to more injuries, particularly with contact sports. How clinically significant that is with our high school, however, is of question. Certainly, both the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Sports Medicine Society has not condemned turf. Most would feel a turf field is superior to a poorly maintained grass field. And certainly what has been well documented and is a big aspect of both societies is overuse injuries. Certainly with a grass field, there are just times when practices, games will be canceled, and having to make those up and sort of compressing the time frame for those is a much well documented risk of injury than the turf field itself.
Thank you. Next up, we have Huff Templeton.
Huff Templeton, 47 Grandview Drive, Williamstown. Our pilot finder gift provides a unique opportunity to invest in programming, not infrastructure. Let the school council give recommendations to establish innovative curricula in areas that will make our students intellectually, physically, and emotionally stronger. I parent two graduates. One daughter took an Arabic class with Principal McDonald a few years ago that gave her an advantage in college. Another daughter took concurrent classes at Williams, and then she later tutored through CLIA. Informal initiatives and innovative programs like these could become more formalized and more widespread. Are we investing enough in the theater and the performing arts, which caters to the LGBTQIAP community? Is our anti-racism training comprehensive? Are we in compliance with Williamstown Town Meeting Articles 36 and 37? Are we being ethical and creative as opposed to simply legal with our IEP and 504 plan students? These pilot funds are not restricted to maintenance as Wes's were. We can borrow at historically low rates for major infrastructure improvements like the fields and pay for preventative maintenance the way every other school does through annual budgeting. Our rate of return on the pilot funds is higher than our borrowing rate. Why spend it down on financeable items? When Wes had HVAC problems, there was a huge incentive to put off maintenance due to the high rate of return of the pilot. Wes is considered a success only because we aren't considering the programs that were jettisoned, like full day side-by-side and Mandarin. We may not have major maintenance repair costs at West, but we also don't have inclusive universal preschool. This is not free money, and we shouldn't treat it as such. We have no obligation to future taxpayers to preclude maintenance expenses on our buildings. We have an obligation to students and parents to make the school the best it can possibly be. Use a pilot like R&D funds. The highest opportunity costs are not invested in our children when we have the chance. Decouple the field decision from the pilot fund. New funds of any kind are either worth the cost of borrowing or they aren't. Balance the total cost of ownership, environmental, and playing time considerations. This is your decision alone and not that of other town boards and leaders. Think about traditionally marginalized groups and what you can do to improve their situation over the next 30 years. Great schools attract new taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Al Terranova.
My name is Al Terranova. I'm a former 5-year member of the Mount Greylock Regional School Committee. Before that, I was a 10-year member of the Lionsboro Finance Committee, 4 years as chairperson. I was appointed to the original Williams College Gift Fund Committee back in 2016. I was subsequently appointed to the Phase 2 Field Committee Subcommittee. I won't give you 4.5 years of information, but rather tell you simply, the simple truth is that grass does not cover our problems, natural or organic. It just doesn't solve the problem. As an example, 2.5 years ago, the Mount Greylock School Committee allocated $55,000 to fix John Allen Field. Over the next 3 subsequent years, we have spent $10,000, $12,000, $15,000, $75,000. This does not include the $30,000 that we are spending on the organic grass experiment that we're doing. That is $100,000 spent, and our fields are unplayable. What is the solution? By some people, let's build another John Allen Field. One of the big criticisms that we get in government is that we don't run government like a business. What business would solve their problems with solutions that don't work? I know I'm going quick, so bear with me. I'll just get down to, we have talked a lot about the subcommittee. Let me tell you about the Phase 2 subcommittee. The Phase 2 subcommittee represented 8 people. 3 of the people were school committee members with a total of over 30 years of experience in education and public service. There were two community members. One member was a professional in the town with experience in
5 seconds, Al.
what?
5 seconds to finish.
Oh my goodness, you're kidding me. All I want to say, then I'll go real quick, is to say, this is an opportunity. If the goal, I'm just talking to the school committee, is to look for universal consensus on opinions, you won't do it. You're going to have a tough one. I'm sorry. I don't think 2 minutes for 28 people is enough. I don't.
We have an hour, Al, and we've designated 2 minutes
okay,
for each person.
The quick
Thank
thing
you.
is, that grass does not solve the problem that's available at Mount Greyrock Regional High School.
Thank you. Christian Malone, you're next.
My name is Chris Malone, and I'm the parent of twin girls in the freshman class. I'm also currently the head coach of the boys cross country team. I oppose the artificial turf field for the following 2 reasons. Number 1, environmental. There's potential that toxins and contaminants may leach into the soil and nearby water supply. Even with the use of rock fill instead of crumb rubber, there is still the plastic carpet to contend with, as well as the unknown environmental impact of rock fill. Although the company representatives may downplay these risks, I would be skeptical, as I think they're more focused on making a sale. Despite claims by the architect that the field is recyclable, I understand there's currently no recycling facility in the United States. Number 2, financial. I understand an artificial turf field will need to be replaced in 8 to 12 years at an estimated cost of $400,000 to $600,000. These costs will be passed on to the taxpayers. We shouldn't expect that Williams College will foot the bill. By deciding to proceed with the artificial turf field, I feel as if we'd be passing on these environmental and financial risks to those who follow us in 10 years. If I didn't think the environmental risk was significant, or if I didn't care much about a financial burden on those in the future, then I'd probably support the artificial turf field. However, I do think these risks are significant enough that I'm opposed. I'm afraid there will be a day of reckoning. We're kicking the can down the road to those in the future. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next up is Brian Gill.
Hi, I'm Brian. I teach physical education and coach at Mount Greylock. I've been there for roughly 24 years, I guess. There are lots of debate, obviously, between turf field and versus other things. But if the fields need to be done, it's really a debate between turf field and a grass field. No doubt there are any positives from an athletic standpoint to a turf field. Consistent playing surface, avoiding mud season, playing extended seasons, no need to rent.
And you're cutting out. I'm wondering, could you turn your video off? There you go.
Generated revenue from rental to others. Regardless of what else we hear, and as we've already heard, the risk attenuation factor in terms of injury is not really a big part of the decision at all. You know, we hear lots of things about the crumb rubber, and I would say jokingly that one. Yeah, exactly. That's why I had it off. Sorry. The crumb rubber, you know, not to be just a jerk, but we really shouldn't be eating it. And in terms, I do say more seriously with the heat, the issue with in terms of heat that people mention, if it's hot, let's be honest, we're not going to be on the turf field at all. If it's hot, if the grass fields are dry, we're going to be on our grass fields. And the coach has said the same thing. So I like to encourage actually to consider turf field for other reasons. Over a fantastic organically tended grass field even, which would be awesome for athletics.
5 seconds, Brian.
Anyone else, because no one else might be allowed on it, as is the case now with John T. Allen Field, which is lousy anyway. One of the major benefits for me of a turf field would be the incredibly large numbers of students that will benefit. While athletics gains hundreds of hours, phys ed would gain potentially thousands of student hours of use. In poor weather and shoulder seasons, and even in the winter, phys ed students will benefit with a chance to be outside. With rain, with frozen turf, and with risk factors involved with physical education and going outside, turf benefits us roughly 7 to 10 extra weeks, potentially 350 students with over 7
Brian,
classes.
I'm sorry, the 2 minutes is
That's
up.
a
Is
lot
there
of time
any way you
that we
can
would
provide
gain
this
outside
detailed
as opposed to being
information in the
inside.
chat?
I'll stop right there.
Thank you. Next up is Wendy Penner.
Great, thank you so much. So taking the time to get this decision right is important to the long-term health and well-being of our district. Please do not be rushed into making a decision about a big capital project without having all the information you need. Please be mindful of the danger that a poorly executed process will lower overall trust in the school committee and in the administration, making your jobs even more difficult. Has a comprehensive life cycle analysis been conducted that takes into account all the knowable information about what is needed for a new athletic field and the environmental, financial, and public health trade-offs of grass versus turf? A life cycle cost analysis should take into account the cost of disposing of and replacing the turf at the end of 10 to 12 years and a strategy for how that cost will be covered. The disposal and replacement costs must be considered before we commit to this path. Massachusetts Department of Public Health has a warning page about artificial turf on the website, last updated in June of 2020. Are you willing to take on the risks that playing on turf entails? I'm mindful of our district's reliance on wells and very sensitive to any possibility that runoff could cause water quality problems. We just learned earlier this month that a chemical found in car tires that runoff from chemicals in crumb rubber is killing coho salmon. I don't think anyone could have anticipated this, said an environmental engineer commenting on the study. We can anticipate. Suitable alternatives to turf exist. The Toxics Use Reduction Institute at UMass Lowell has published 2 case studies that show how organically managed playing turf fields. That is not what we have right now. This is a methodology for organically managing playing fields. In Springfield and Marblehead have performed as well as artificial turf and much better than conventionally managed natural grass athletic fields. These organic fields stand up to heavy rain, regular sports, and community use and can be played on for a full season with no time lost at the beginning of the year waiting for them to dry out. They are not contaminated with chemicals. The soil and grass are restored with organic products and gradually strengthened to become a healthy, resilient playing surface. Instead of ecological harm, they contribute to a healthy ecosystem and increased biodiversity. Members of this previous school committee have discarded concerns from community members as white noise and dismissed people as not caring about what is best for the kids when they questioned a turf field option. I vigorously reject this characterization and ask you to take your responsibility of doing better seriously. Take time to collect information.
Your time's up. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thomas, you're up next.
Ostheimer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I am a teacher, coach of the girls soccer and lacrosse teams, and a parent of 3 former Greylock grads who are all athletes. And I wholeheartedly support the building of a turf field. First off, as you've heard, our game field is inadequate. And a recent resod 2.5 years ago did not solve the problem. In fact, it made it even worse. The poor drainage continued, standing water problems continued, and the surface was even more uneven and harder, and athletes were very prone to injuries. Secondly, a turf field will give players and coaches the peace of mind on game days, knowing that our field will be playable, and it will eliminate all kinds of questions and anxiety about when the game will be played and when it will, if not played, when will it be rescheduled, all of these questions that really interfere with the educational environment every afternoon when there is a decision that needs to be made on whether we're going to play or not. Third, a turf field will afford us the opportunity to host pre and post game tournaments, but because we could be relied on for having a safe and playable surface, no matter the conditions. Fourth, our students could really use a shot in the arm these days, some good news on the school front. And I think this is a great solution to have a turf field, and it would create an even playing field for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Molly Polk or Peter Lowe.
Hi, it's Molly here. Thank you.
Hi, Molly.
Good afternoon, members of the school committee and Dr. McCandless. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. In my teaching, in my parenting, and my work as a colleague and community member, I try to embody the idea that while we may go far alone, we can go further together. As I reflect at this juncture on the issues that are before us at today's forum, I can't help but asking, how can we come together and go further? How can we model for the young people of our community a way forward through a very complex situation, a way forward that is transparent and inclusive? I have great confidence that everyone speaking here this evening believes that their perspective represents what is best for the students of Mount Greylock Regional School. What dismays me tremendously, though, is that there has not been, to date, a meaningful and sustained effort on the part of the school committee to bring diverse perspectives together to investigate and engage in real dialogue about the concerns pertaining to the Williams College gift that have been sparked by the Phase 2 subcommittee's recommendation to use the gift for an artificial turf field. At other times over the last year and a half, I have submitted statements about the value of exploring options for natural grass field maintenance, as have others with much greater expertise than I. I trust that the newly elected school committee will thoroughly review all of the documentation that has been collected. It was thanks to the dedicated efforts of the Phase 2 subcommittee that options for an artificial turf field have been put on the table. But I urge the school committee to recognize the critical importance of bringing the community together to explore and debate more than just this singular option for our students. Some argue that this process has gone on long enough and that all of the options have already been weighed, but I would ask, by whom? A project of this nature, size, and cost does take time. And to get it right, really right, so that we can go as far as possible as a community, there need to be more voices invited and
5 seconds.
And lingering unanswered questions must be answered. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Malcolm Smith.
Hi, I am Malcolm Smith of Williamstown. I'm a constituent, a voter, a parent of a student. Thanks to all for carrying water for our community, those that are pro, con, and particularly the school committee. This is my first time addressing the school committee on this subject. I think perhaps I'm part of a quiet majority in favor of turf, and particularly of the school committee making a decision. I urge the school committee to decide soon and to decide to go forward with turf. I echo the pro-turf arguments that I've heard now so many times for these many months. Too many months of the school year, grass doesn't work. We need a choice between grass and turf. Please give us the turf option. Maintaining grass isn't cheap either. Turf is safe. Getting kids and community members outside has tremendous health value that outweighs any other health concerns. Environmental concerns have been addressed repeatedly over this long process. I'm a devoted to conservation causes in this community, and a single turf field is just fine with me. Please spend the money to benefit the kids and the community. There's ample reserve remaining even after the expense of the turf field. Stop delaying, looking, considering, studying. That costs money too. Please make the decision soon and move on to other matters. Please move forward to get a turf field. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Bridget Spann.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Bridget Spann, and I am the parent of an 8th grade child who plays sports at Mount Greylock. I do support investing in quality athletic playing fields as I recognize that sports and physical education are important, healthy outlets for youth. And I agree that the current fields are not adequately maintained or safe. I remain concerned, however, that playability is considered by some the single most important factor, to the exclusion of other critical considerations, which then leads to identifying a single artificial turf field as a need rather than as a want. This is like considering drivability as the single most important factor and then purchasing a Hummer to allow for travel in Berkshire County in almost any weather conditions, while not factoring in important considerations such as its life cycle cost and environmental impact, factors that steer most of us into buying other vehicles. Rather than spending an exorbitant amount on a single artificial turf field, these funds could be better utilized to invest in a new natural grass field that could be managed organically as well as a track, and remaining funds could be used to improve the existing grass fields. The substitution of rock fill for crumb rubber does not allay the serious financial and environmental considerations for artificial turf. In addition to the study by the Toxic Use Reduction Institute, many other studies, meaning those not conducted by the artificial turf industry, have found that in nearly all scenarios, artificial turf fields have higher life cycle costs than natural turf for an equivalent area. My concern is that Traverse Landscape Architects in its presentation represents artificial turf as the best return on our investment. How? By using a cost per hours per use projection that's been written about in Forbes magazine under the heading, How Taxpayers Get Fooled on the Cost of an Artificial Turf Field. Traverse also didn't include information about disposal costs, reference a recycling option that doesn't exist. As you move forward at a time, I ask you to utilize a sound financial analysis of the life cycle costs and be clear with the community what the additional days of play available from an artificial turf field are going to cost us. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Allison Carter, you're next.
Hi, Allie Carter, Williamstown resident. I'm hoping that as you think about the information presented tonight, you're able to answer these key questions presented, along with how I've been thinking about them as a member of the school committee for the past 2 years. First, can we make grass work? I think we should start with the assumption that grass is the ideal option. My understanding is that this is not realistic for several reasons: lack of a water source for irrigation, poor drainage, high annual maintenance costs, and our challenging weather conditions that lead to unsafe playing conditions and canceled games. Is a Brockville turf field unsafe? The data say no, from a temperature perspective and a body impact perspective. Regarding chemical exposure, our kids are exposed to a level of toxicity every day through things like furniture, rugs, car interiors, food packaging, makeup. I don't feel it's fair to vilify environmentally minded artificial turf free of the chemicals that have been flagged of concern while overlooking the other exposure in our lives. What is the true net environmental impact of a turf field in context and in direct comparison to a well-maintained grass field? In a time where 70% of carbon emissions come from the oil and gas industry and nearly everything we own or do comes at some cost to the environment, we need to have an honest conversation about the environmental impacts of a Brockville field. I find it hard to reconcile being okay with the high environmental impact of our cars, clothes, food, coffee, and lawn maintenance, while vilifying something that has comparatively low environmental impact and helps our kids be more active and healthy and builds critical life skills. Finally, how are other schools balancing field costs with expensive regular maintenance needs? Many schools that do not have millions of dollars of gift money have turf fields. How are they making it work? For financial, safety, environmental, and health reasons, I am in favor of a Brockville turf field, and I hope you feel the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ken Kuttner.
Unmute my video. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Ken Kuttner, Williamstown resident and a father of a 2013 Greylock grad. I have two general points to make. The first relates to the environmental consequences. An artificial turf field is an environmental disaster, to put it bluntly. For one thing, its greenhouse gas emissions far exceed those of a natural grass field. Using data from published studies, I calculated that an artificial turf field of this size would emit about 527 tons of greenhouse gas emissions over 10 years. Maintaining a natural grass field does involve some greenhouse gas emissions due to mowing and the like, but the grass also sequesters CO2. On net, the published estimates indicate that the emissions over 10 years would be about 31.4 tons for the grass field, only 6% from what comes from the artificial turf field. Or if you prefer to put it in this way, 1,861 trees. I'd be happy to share those calculations with anybody who's interested. Waste disposal is the other concern. Others have already mentioned it, so I'll be brief. There is currently no market for so-called recyclable plastic. It's all going into landfills, another big environmental concern. My second point has to do with finances. Related to the previous comment about disposal, somebody's already mentioned that. But another problem with the financial calculations presented by the architects to justify the artificial turf field is that they treat current and future costs as equivalent. Because most of the artificial turf field are up front, this stacks the deck against the natural grass field, whose costs are spread out over time. All of my introductory economics students know this is wrong, and if they did this on my final exam, they would fail. The correct way to put costs and benefits on equal footing is to calculate what's known as the present value, downweighting those future costs by an appropriate financial rate of return. Correcting this error significantly increases the cost of the artificial turf field relative to the grass alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Rob Abel.
Thank you. My name is Rob Abel. I live in Williamstown. I'm a financial advisor at Mountain One Investments, where we manage over $750 million for individuals and institutions right here in the Berkshires. The financial impact that Phase 2 project would have on future school budgets and taxpayers is a legitimate concern. Here are the facts to consider. The current value of the Williams gift sits at approximately $4 million. The Phase 2 project is estimated at $2.8 million, of which approximately 1.1 to 1.2 million will be used for the turf field. The turf replacement cost of $500,000 and needed in year 12, although it could certainly last 15 or more if cared for properly. To get a sense of how this scenario could play out, I went back 12 years and replicated what would have happened if the turf field was built in 2008 and needed replacing today in 2020. I used the actual performance results of the Williams Endowment over that time, a period that included the Great Recession, Hurricane Sandy, Irma, and Maria, the Russian invasion of Crimea, the California wildfires, and of course, the global pandemic. This 12 years was not picked for its stellar results. In fact, the average annual return of 7.8% is well below the endowment's 10-year average of 11.2 and its 20-year average of 9.1. If this project was completed in 2008, at the height of the Great Recession, the residual value of the Williams gift, that being the amount of money remaining after building the administration building and completing Phase 2 project, would have grown from 1.2 million in 2008 to $2,752,707 in 2020. That's right, over $2.7 million. Today, 12 years later, there'd be more than enough funds to cover the cost of replacing the turf field.
5 seconds.
While past results never guarantee future performance, we can clearly illustrate that the Williams gift can not only upgrade our facilities today, but far into the future. This is not my opinion. This is math. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Erin Kaiser Clark.
Hi, thanks for having me. Just hearing what people are saying, I think it's really important to have some facts clear that we do not have an organic grass field at the high school, and that has been misstated repeatedly throughout the year. And that's concerned me, that is an untruth. That is not the model that what I'm hearing we are being asked to look at and to consider as an alternative option. I think this is really important. I also want to share that I too have the perception that I am part of the quiet majority in town who has not, who's not felt comfortable with this process. This process has been too uncomfortable. I understand there are parents, there are youth, there are kids on the sports team. There's a full range of there's taxpayers who have not been comfortable with this process, who feel that it has been sort of, it has been centralized, and the conversation has been centralized around those who want the turf field. And we haven't had an open and important process where everyone can feel comfortable sharing concerns and perceptions about what our tax dollars will be used for and what our kids will be playing on, and precisely who will benefit and how they will benefit. My greatest concern and my greatest hope is that this new slate of people on our committee will give this process go forward very differently than we have before, that is inclusive and considerate of all the voices and perspectives, and give us options, share with us options. A few years back, our select board asked for advice on how to bring up major builds, and the advice given was provide options to the community, let them participate in the process. I'm asking you, please let us participate in that process and allow us to see a comparison. Thanks.
Thank you. Jim Easton, you're next.
Hi, hello. My name is Jim Easton, and I'm the golf course superintendent of Takana Golf Club in Williamstown. Speaking tonight in favor of an artificial turf surface, and feel obligated to highlight some of the inherent challenges and difficulties in maintaining grass athletic surfaces in our region. Number one, the largest hurdle is rooted in biology. Spring sports are often scheduled to begin well before soil temperatures are warm enough for the grass plants to fully break dormancy. A similar pattern emerges during the latter portion of the fall sports season. Cool season grasses need to be fully growing and vigorous to support sustained use by student athletes, regardless of fertility source. A new grass field with modern drainage and irrigation would still fail to thrive during the shoulder seasons. Basic plant soil biology presents an enormous obstacle in producing a safe, reliable grass playing surface in our region. Number two, an often overlooked aspect of maintaining a grass surface well is the countless hours behind the scenes performing maintenance. A safe and reliable surface requires a regimented program of cultural inputs and an active rotation scheme. If irrigation is installed, there's a considerable amount of oversight required to ensure it's performing as intended. It's unclear to me if the school district will have resources available to provide the level of professional care a new grass field would require. It's my opinion that an artificial playing surface would be an incredible asset for the school district students and would largely eliminate the need to constantly fight the local climate and keep our students active on a much more consistent level. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Nicholas Wright. Dr. Wright, are you out there?
He's muted.
Oh, okay. Let's see if I can get him unmuted. Don't think I can. Okay, let's skip down to Michael Nixon and we'll come back to Dr. Wright. Oh, there he is. He's unmuted.
All right, thank you. I'm a retired medical epidemiologist and I've lived in Williamstown for 20 years. Just a few years ago, there was urgent concern over levels of perchlorate in the wells supplying water to MGRS. That problem was solved, yet today the committee is considering the installation of an artificial turf field containing a variety of volatile organic compounds as well as heavy metals, including lead. Some of these organic compounds have been found to be carcinogenic. The concentration of these compounds will vary by source of the discarded rubber from which the artificial field is constructed. The degree of exposure to these materials cannot easily be determined, yet we would ask our children and grandchildren to play on them for sport as well as physical exercise. Outcomes may be long-term as well as short. Unfortunately, no strongly designed long-term studies are available.
None of the short-term studies show that playing on an artificial surface lowers the risk of leg, knee, and ankle injury. Although one peer-reviewed experimental study suggests a statistically significant increase in knee ligament damage in the artificial turf group. The control group played on natural grass turf. The study has been dismissed because the population was college age rather than high school, but the age differences are not great. The study should be done among high school students. But as it stands,
You have 5 seconds.
sorry, I lost my piece of paper there, but the prudent course, in my judgment, is to reject artificial turf and instead improve existing turf surfaces and maintain them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Talia.
Hello, school committee members and everybody else watching. My name is Talia Cappadona, and I'm on the girls soccer team and lacrosse team. Julius is also speaking.
Yeah, we wrote something together, so we're gonna sort of split our time. Sorry if that's a little confusing. It's been a lot of pandering nonsense and a couple of good points on both sides, so maybe we can provide a little bit of both, get this thing moving. So I'm a captains of the boys soccer team. I'm going to start off this statement. So as both athletes and members of the Phase 2 subcommittee, we can't stress enough how important a cause the prospect of a turf field has become for us over the years. Emphasis on years. I know the fields at Greylock, at least for me, are where I made some of my favorite memories during my own games or watching the other athletes play. The current athletic setup at Greylock definitely has a very special place in my heart.
And that's why it's so important to us, even as seniors, that the school uses the capital gift money, or at least part of it, on the construction of a synthetic turf playing surface. While the nostalgia and memories filled in the current game field are great, the field itself has long since had its day. COVID has tremendously affected our last soccer seasons, and for me personally, has left us with a feeling of unfinished business here at Greylock.
Our abridged senior seasons have left us with certain perspective that we didn't really have when we joined the committee. As sophomores, when this whole thing started for us, a shiny new turf field sounded like the perfect remedy to the bounces and the bruises and the blunders of high school soccer. This past season put that all in check. The field was not the most important aspect of this season. When it boils down to it, the people you surround yourself with, your team and your coaches, define the year for you, especially for me. The heart of the athletic experience lies in your teammates and our coaches. Understanding that my time on these fields is over, there is nothing I want more than a synthetic turf field for the Greylock teams to come and the kids who made this season so great for me. I feel as their captain, helping them through the foreseeable future is the least I can do.
A more reliable playing surface will provide those students with a blanket to protect them against the unreliable world that we live in today. Bidding now would help ensure that these school students can make some of the same memories that we've been so lucky to make for years to come.
Thank you both. Michael Nixon, you're up next.
Good evening. My name is Michael Nixon. I'm a longtime Williamstown resident. I'm a father of a student, and public school teaching has been my profession. Thank you to the committee members for your time. I am all for outdoor pursuits, physical and outdoor education, 100%. In addition to the environmental issues already mentioned, being serious and legitimate concerns, my focus and concern is also the financial. I totally understand there is a need to address the state of the playing fields, and funds should be used from the Williams College donation, but not 2.5 million. The generous gift from a Williams donor was for 2 words, educational enrichment. So why the excessive funding for one area of the curriculum? Surely soccer and lacrosse players will be the main beneficiaries, a fraction of the student body. Again, I am all for outdoor pursuits. Would it not be more aligned with the goals of this large gift to have an expenditure that benefited a larger amount of students beyond dedicated athletes? Furthermore, on the financial concern, I taught at a public school in Australia where they installed artificial turf because of an ongoing drought situation. But the maintenance and replacement costs far exceeded forecasts. So by all means, improve the fields, but not with 2.5 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Harrison.
Good evening. My name is Peter Harrison. I'm a Williamstown resident and president of Williamstown Soccer Club. When significant time and money is invested in building and maintaining grass fields, the tendency is that field usage will become more restrictive as it will be quote unquote saved for games. This results in a better experience for the 200 or so kids playing organized sports, but likely no benefit to the wider school population or the broader community. We need a solution that will increase usage, not further restrict it. Secondly, the weather in Berkshire County is a real issue. While the weather in 2020 has been quite mild all year, frequently field conditions become unplayable in early November. And in 2018 and 2019, the start of the Youth Spring League season was delayed until the start of May due to late winter storms and freezing conditions. Conditions were poor even at Wes, whose fields are actually way better quality than Mount Greylock. Both the local pickup soccer group and Ajax Youth Soccer Club in normal times make use of Williams College turf fields through the winter. Basically, the only thing that prevents athletic activity is lined snow. The moment it melts, the space is usable. If we lived in the Carolinas or Virginia or even New Jersey, I don't think there would be much of a debate, but we don't. We live in Williamstown on the exposed side of a mountain with a climate that is not conducive to grass playing fields almost 2/3 of the school year. A turf field will not only extend the amount of time for athletic outdoor use, but it will actually benefit all kids in the school and have greater value to the community as a whole. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Marc McDermott. I'm not sure if he is available yet. Oh, there he is.
Sorry, you'd think I would have figured out unmuting myself by now. I apologize. Thanks. I'm going to just ask if our communities can unify around a larger purpose of trying to get a field built with a track around it as soon as is reasonably possible. I'm not here to state a preference for the turf or a grass field. I think either would be great. I do think a bit of a frame shift might be helpful though. I think this will be a community resource. I don't think just soccer and lacrosse players are going to use it. I think once we get the track that my 93-year-old neighbor Doris, former school teacher, will walk there. I think new parents will stroll there with their 2- and 4-month-olds. I think my daughter Maple will probably learn to ride a bike on a track where it's safe. Furthermore, although grass is awesome to play on, I don't think there can be any doubt that turf will be used more. And if you need proof of that, we have some of the greatest grass fields in Williamstown at the college, and they generously let people go on them most of the time. Pole Field and Poker Flats. You don't see people playing Frisbee, pickup soccer, etc. on those places in November through April. But you do see kids and other people playing Frisbee and fooling around on the turf. The turf will extend the use of kids' outdoor time and exercise. So again, I'm actually not advocating for turf or natural grass, but that point I think has to be clearly made by just observing usage in our town. Finally, early in this process, some people did ask me about health effects, direct hazards of artificial crumb rubber on pediatric adolescent health. I did talked to the pediatric environmental health specialty in our region and was provided with materials about those. I forwarded to the school committee a year ago. My opinion, without going into my credentials, is that any worries about direct health effects on our kids or adolescents from a reasonable material, it should not weigh in this decision. I think the questions are valid and reasonable, but I don't think, my advice to the committee would be to say that those are noted and important, to use the least recycled, the least toxic version of artificial surface, if you go that way that you can. But my advice would ultimately to make your decision based on other grounds. Thanks for your time.
My apologies. Next up, we have Blair Dils.
Hello, I've been an English teacher, part-time PE instructor, and soccer coach for 21 years at Mount Greylock. Our commitment has always been to give our students the best possible educational experience that they can have, and the construction of a high-quality turf field honors that commitment. When the community approved the construction and renovation of a new high school in 2016, it showed its clear commitment to students by creating 21st century science labs, high-level art spaces, a beautiful theater, and one of the best gym spaces in the county. But the quality of the fields are substandard and, quite honestly, embarrassing. In 2017, my soccer players chose not to host a tournament game at our school, their home field, because of the poor condition of our game field. Grass fields don't maintain themselves, and the labor and financial resources needed to maintain grass playing surfaces on a yearly basis will not be sustainable. Opponents of the turf field would like townspeople to think that the turf fields are unsafe. This is a disinformation campaign designed to muddy the truth just enough so that people who may not have been able to study the matter closely will not want to take a risk and support the building of a turf field. There isn't risk here. Turf fields are reliable, multifaceted, widely accepted, and preferred by coaches and athletes. I am hard pressed to believe that hundreds of high schools, prep schools, and municipalities, the MIAA, colleges, and universities would assume the liability of installing an unsafe playing surface if turf fields were actually as unsafe as opponents say they are. There's a reason we no longer play lacrosse with wooden sticks, protect our football players with leather helmets, or use hand-stitched leather soccer balls. They are outdated. The turf field is the modern playing surface. We have an obligation to bring all of our programs into the 21st century and do what is best for our PE students and our student athletes. Given our location and our resources, building a turf field is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hugh Daley.
Hello. I had a slightly different bent on this. I'm speaking tonight to ask the school committee to prioritize the setup of a $1.5 million building endowment fund for Mount Greylock. The Williamstown Select Board, Finance Committee, and Lanesboro Select Board all support this idea. In 2017, the district agreed to transfer the cost of the parking lot from the Williams gift into the Mount Greylock building project. We did that to free up money in the Williams gift for a building endowment fund. We also did that knowing it would increase the total debt service for the project, which in turn increased each town's tax rate. The general idea was that our cost of funds would be less than our investment return, which would create earnings that could be used to finance capital needs without further tax increases to the towns. This is the critical point. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have our investment earnings, not taxes, secure the future capital maintenance of our school. We are beyond fortunate to have this opportunity. Let's not squander. After you've established the building endowment, I would allocate the remaining money into have-tos and want-tos. The Title IX and ADA compliance are have-tos. Your want-tos are the ads like the track or turf field. Please make sure your future bids will give you the detail you need to decide between the have-tos and want-tos. I believe our goal is a lifetime of fitness for all our students. We want our infrastructure to offer that opportunity to the broadest number of students at the most efficient cost possible. Please protect our investment in our school. Please honor the burden already being borne by taxpayers to create the building endowment fund. And please allow this investment in our district's future to grow for the benefit of all for years to come. Please set aside $1.5 million into the building endowment fund. Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Hugh. We have, just so everyone knows, we have 3 more speakers. Joe Finnegan, you are up next.
Hi, I'm Joe Finnegan, 91 Northwest Hill Road in Williamstown. We moved to town 15 years ago, and I was quickly drafted to be a youth soccer and a youth lacrosse coach for several years. We spent many great afternoons, spring and fall, running around the fields of Williamstown from west to Mount Greylock. My recollection is that depending on the season, there are 7 to 10 natural grass fields in use at the high school, and that all of those fields, due to the weather, are unusable from approximately November 15th to April 15th. That is 50% of the school year. And if I understand correctly, the turf field that is under consideration would utilize approximately 1.5 to 2 acres of a 110-acre campus and would not replace any of the grass fields that are currently in use. So when completed, the turf field would take up less than 2% of the total acreage of the campus and would account for at most 12.5% of the playing field space at Mount Greylock, with the other 87.5% of the playing field still natural grass and dirt, of course. For me, it's all about the kids. I think we owe it to the families of Williamstown to build this turf field and give them the opportunity to get outside and play year round. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you. Next up, we have Keith Taft. Is Keith here? Does anyone see Keith? Okay, I'm not seeing Keith, so we'll move on to Jonathan Ego. Is Jonathan here? Okay, I think that is it. Thank you everyone for your comments. It is truly appreciated. Committee, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Johnson moves. Do I have a second?
Bowen seconds.
1 second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote alphabetically, please.
Bowen, aye.
Conry, aye.
Constantine, aye.
Elfenbein, aye.
Green, aye.
Miller,
Johnson, aye.
Oh, sorry. Miller, aye. Force of habit.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Truly appreciated.
Thanks, Christina. Well done.
Thanks so much.
Christina, we're back at 7. Yes, back at 7.